Athletes, take your mark. Get set. It's time for the Addict to Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Bill Robinson here. Hey, thank you so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast. We greatly appreciate you doing so. Thank you so much for leaving reviews. It helps us get this podcast out a little bit further and really gets us in connection with you, the listener. So thanks so much for putting in an extra couple of seconds to write us a review. Hey, good or bad, we'll take them. We really do like the feedback. Athletes, as we approach this new year, we want to have your attentions turned to our website, addicttoathlete.org. You'll find all of our upcoming events and races and new meetings that we're being able to host now that we have our own home base, and really kind of provide an outlet for you to seek recovery in a non-traditional manner, by erasing your addiction and replacing it with things of greater value. That's how we see success. But listeners, I want to thank you all again for everything you've done through the holiday season. We couldn't have done Project Up without you. And let's look forward to 2023 as being a strong year by which we can bring new individuals into this circle of recovery. So athletes, today I got a great guest. We've been following this individual for a while on social media. And he's been featured on other podcasts that we've kind of recommended. And I'm excited to have Paul Lapine here today. Paul, you, brother, have a rhythm and a heartbeat that is near and dear to me, because you've seen the same thing I've seen, which is an underserved modality of recovery that when people truly invest in, they can have amazing outcomes. I'm a firm believer that movement equals healing. I've seen it firsthand for the past 12 years. You have embarked on a new kind of approach too that I think is going to be extremely beneficial for the people in your area. Paul, welcome to the podcast. Let's jump in by talking a little bit about you, maybe your history, maybe dive into why you decided to serve the substance abuse population and how you're choosing to do that. Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Coach Lou. How are you doing today? You all right?
No, we're doing great, man. Battling the cold weather, but I think you guys are probably too, right? Out there in God's country, back east.
Yeah, same. It's getting a little chilly here, but it's not too bad. Yeah.
Oh, man. So tell me a little bit about your history. Yeah, what got you into a mindset of service? Was it following a battle with your own addictions?
Yeah, for sure. So I can go into my story a little bit. So I quit drinking about 3 years ago. I've always been really active. So I've always leaned on physical activity, throughout most of my 20s. I'm 32 now, when I was kind of having a hard time with drinking and stuff like that. So, I think it goes back to when I was a kid. So when I was 12 years old, I had a lot of, my father passed away. My father overdosed on opiates and cocaine when I was 12 years old. And, needless to say, that had a really large impact on me. And then later on, as I got a little older in my mid-teens, my mom started to really struggle with drinking. So she was always probably like, what we would say now is a gray area drinker. And then she got remarried. And she had my brother, and like the postpartum depression just like hit her like a ton of bricks. So she was just like kind of drinking all the time. It came to a head. We had like cops come to the house and CPS and all that jazz. I won't get into it here, but but luckily mom's been sober for like 16 years, I think. She's a rock star. Mom's great. But during that time, I really didn't want to be home. My mom wasn't in a good state, and there was a baby in the house, so things were tough. So around that time, when I was like 16, I found boxing. And that was just like kind of my main outlet. I loved it. I was there for 2 hours a day. It got me out of the house. And exactly what you guys stand for, and what I'm trying to stand for as well, is just like finding an outlet that helps get you away from your problem. You know what I mean? And it really did that for me. So I trained for a couple of years, and then I had my first fight and I won, and everything was great. And, I was a really angry kid. And after I had that first competition, things just kind of calmed down for me, and not too long after that, I got into cannabis, and I was kind of like a dawn till dusk stoner type, like all day, every day, work, school, whatever. I was like high all the time. And then I went away to college, joined a fraternity, and got into some other recreational drugs like ecstasy and cocaine. But I was always very wary because of my father and my mom. I kind of saw the route it could go. So I always managed to, moderate to whatever degree I could. And then, fast forward a little bit, got through college, bartending full time, still keeping the fitness stuff around, but nothing like super competitive. I had I would have like a few amateur bouts here and there. And that was really when like my drinking was getting the better of me. When I felt like it was becoming a problem, it was kind of my way to like get away from it. I would go compete and, try out for 6 weeks or so, whatever it was. Um, yeah. And then I got a DUI when I was like 23, 24. And that really like kind of flipped a switch where, I was just bartending. I was living at home. I didn't feel like I was doing as well as I could be. And, yeah, so after that, I kind of started to get myself together, got into a master's program out here in New York City. I lived on Long Island at the time, which is a suburb. And I moved out here to Brooklyn, where I've lived for the last 8 years. So during that time, I got a master's degree in physical education. I started a personal training business. And then I actually just left my full-time position in the Department of Education here in New York City. This is actually my first week not working. To pursue to pursue my business full time. I opened a small studio in 2020 during COVID, just as a place to train my clients, and it's grown. So now I have members and coaches and stuff. And throughout that whole span through my 20s, it was like really a constant battle. Kind of with really cannabis and alcohol. Like cannabis, like I mentioned, was my main thing up till my mid 20s, and then I got to the point where it kind of just wasn't working for me anymore. I kind of got all those stereotypical like paranoid and I couldn't sleep and the munchies and all these things. And then I kind of turned to drinking more, which tended to have more negative outcomes. Yeah. And then, I one thing that kind of stuck with me, Lou, was I couldn't figure out, my life kind of started trending in the right direction in my late 20s, I would say. I had the regular job, I had a good girlfriend, I had steady this, that, and the third, right? All the things you kind of want, but I was still finding myself like over drinking. You know what I mean? Like I was usually like a 3-4 beers 3-4 times a week guy, which doesn't sound too bad, but then at least once or twice a week, I would like go way overboard with it. And things came to a head. I got into a really bad fight with my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, and just kind of kept coming back to that. Like, why is this still a problem? Like things are turning around for me. And then, I started diving into the quit lit and stuff and going to some meetings and getting involved in some groups. And that was February of 2020, and I've been away from alcohol since then. And in that time, and a big motivator for me, Blue, was as it relates to what you guys stand for, is like I always kind of wondered like how much was I leaving on the table athletically, I love fighting, I love boxing, but I only had like 4 fights. I've been doing it for so long, and a lot of that was because I was drinking too much. So I wanted to see. So since I've been sober, I've been doing a lot of different athletic pursuits. I did a powerlift competition. That was cool. I ran an ultra marathon. That was awesome. I got my RKC certification, which is a kettlebell certification. Yeah. And I've just really dove into that. Using fitness as a way to maintain sobriety and recovery.
Jeez, man. So I got lots of questions. I love the fact that you didn't allow that cycle of addiction to consume you, brother. And actually you turned that consumption that your family system got caught in into kind of a purpose to start producing a better outcome. So I'm curious, guys like you, guys like me, who are in situations where we have some trauma early on in our family systems, we're not supposed to succeed. We're supposed to find the easy way out. We're supposed to kind of take the path that everyone takes of, well, it's not my fault. It's my parents' fault. It's the world's fault. It's society's fault. How in the world did you not fall into that and stay kind of to a degree on a path that brought you a high school diploma, a college education, and then to become kind of like a physical teacher in school? Like that's not the rules of engagement when it comes to trauma and addiction. How in the world did you maintain that despite the fact you had a lot of stuff, adversity, kind of like pushing you back? How did you stay focused enough to get things done?
Yeah, Blue, thanks for that. And thank you. That's really nice of you to say. I think just seeing where it could go, you know what I mean? Like seeing like the end result of where it could go was always a lot of motivation for me to not go all the way down that path. You know what I mean? I would always manage to kind of like fight back in a sense, and I really credit much of that to always being a physically active person. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I said, I'm going into this more now that I'm not drinking and I can pursue these endeavors. But, I was always working out. I was always training and stuff like that. So just having that outlet was was always beneficial to me. And I feel like, like we all do, like I had a lot of bottoms, you know what I mean? Like I had a lot of these moments where I was like, I can't keep going this way. You know what I mean? Like I had like, one thing like the DUI, like that was a really big one. Like I mentioned, like getting into a big fight with my girlfriend at the time, fiance, and seeing that like, my drinking was putting my relationship on uneven ground, and I could probably name about like a dozen other things that happened, but these events kind of just like punctuated my use. And each time one of these events happened, I would like realize where I was going and try to like climb up a little bit. But then eventually, the drugs and alcohol will like drag you and pull you back down. And I get to another point, try to crawl up a little bit, and so on and so forth. And so, we've all heard the thing, like until enough was enough, until I decided I didn't want to live like that anymore.
Jeez. Yeah. I think that's amazing because again, I just you even having enough, I guess, heart to follow through with things despite the circumstances you were given is amazing to me. It's kind of a cool thing because it's a metaphor for what I think you did in the boxing ring, right? I mean, I find it real interesting that guys that go through stuff like you've experienced, that they have an interesting relationship with pain. And I'm sure like in the boxing ring, there's probably times when it kind of hurt, but it didn't compare to the hurt that you experienced on an emotional level in real life. And I think that sometimes we forget that people in addiction have this very strange relationship with pain because, brother, even getting into a ring scares the crap out of me because I kind of want to avoid pain. But yet you did that, and I get that there's discipline that comes with boxing. I totally understand that there are principles that apply there, from the right position to what kind of, punches to how to defend yourself. Did you find that being in the ring early on kind of helped you cope with some of that emotional pain? Because I hate to say this, but it transferred to a different kind of pain. And it was you that was kind of in control by how much pain you received, depending on how much you trained, depending on how much you were willing to listen and be coached. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that, brother. I'm so curious because to me, man, I want to stay as far away from a fight as possible, but you're like, hey, let's go. Let's make a hobby out of this. Tell me about that.
Yeah, no, I do. And I love that. I listened to your podcast this morning where you were speaking to pain. And I think that's like a really interesting point. I think it was a different way for me to like identify as, what I mean? Like I could like there's a lot of, I don't know the word to use. Noble isn't a good word, but there's a lot of like desirable characteristics that you would associate with like a fighter or a boxer. They work hard, they're disciplined, all of these things, right? Which is like the antithesis of what someone who has a problem with drugs and alcohol really has, So I think for me, it was like an identity kind of thing. But I think pain is definitely like a big part of it, but I think it's also stress. Like I have like a theory on why exercise is really important for people in recovery, just because I think through the trauma that most of us experience that leads to our use gives us just like an unbalanced relationship with stress. You know what I mean? We have this thing that happens to us, this event, whatever it is, and we never deal with it. We never cope with it. And that stresses us out. And then I think in turn, over time, that trauma that isn't diagnosed, it like manifests itself in your day-to-day things, right? It's like you see the dishes in the sink and it's like a catastrophe. It's like, how am I going to do the dishes? You know what I mean? It's like these little things like can really trip you up. And it's just because you have this like poor relationship with stress. You don't have to know how to deal with stress. And it's just like a part of life. So I think when we exercise, we are like kind of telling our brains, we're like voluntarily exposed. Like we're going to do this of our own accord. Like we're going to engage in this activity that is going to stress us, but we're going to come out on the other side okay and even better.
I love that. I think you are speaking true principle, and listeners, I hope you're following, because what Paul's discussing really is kind of the foundation, the blueprint for your success, if you can understand where this is coming from. But I still kind of think that like when you're in that situation where you're staring at your opponent, how much did you know about some of the guys on the other side of the ring? I'm sure you watched tape. I'm sure you heard stories. I'm sure you kind of studied moves. How often do you think we get in the ring and try to fight addiction with being completely underprepared? Like we don't really know its strategy. We don't really know what its move is. And so when that bell rings, we're coming out swinging, but we get nailed quick because we're like, crap, I underestimated how strong this opponent truly is. I mean, what do you think we get wrong when we try to jump into this without having some tools of engagement, right? I mean, if you're just going to jump into a ring without any any knowledge, you're gonna be in trouble, right?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think in the day and age we're in now with like Instagram and all these other places, it's a good way for people to like stick their toe in the water and start to kind of understand what's going on without diving in. Like, no, I'm sure a lot of people had this experience. Like for me, going to my first meeting, I stayed in the parking lot of like 10 meetings before I actually walked into one. You know what I mean? I would like go there and I wait outside. I'm going to go in. I'm not sure if I'm going to go in. Then I wouldn't go in. You know what I mean? I did that probably like 10 times where I physically like walked into a place. So I think prior until, I don't know, maybe up until like 3 or 4 years ago, something like that was the only way to learn about what you're dealing with and get these tools. Maybe you could do some research on the internet, but it wasn't like now where it's like, you follow someone and they're giving you these valuable tools, these valuable ways to learn and to cope. And then, there's like a progression. If you're like sober curious, it's like, I don't love that term, but if you're like questioning your relationship with alcohol and you're seeing someone on Instagram that, they post about like a tool that they use and you're like, oh, maybe I could try that. And then you try that and it works a little bit. Then you're like, you start inching in the right direction. Like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Maybe, I don't know, you follow a few other people's, you learn a few, you know what I mean? And you have these little steps that'll get you to, a meeting or some other medium where you're going to like actually like do concentrated work on this and try to fix it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. And I think about those kind of situations where we kind of, I think, grow with experience and whatnot, but we always have, and I hope maybe you had one of these people in your life. Someone was kind of a mentor or coach or a trainer that kind of like led you. Like, I'm curious, the last time that you got yourself into a position where you're like, I'm done being intoxicated. I'm done with this. What was it? What was the last thing that made you say, all right, I'm hanging up, this issue in my life and I'm going to take on this? Like, was there a situation that happened? Was there an aha moment that occurred to have you kind of literally like retire from addiction and kind of like lean into this new life?
Yeah, 100%. So, like I mentioned, I was with my girlfriend at the time, fiance now. We've been together probably about like 6 or 7 months, something like that. And it was the first like serious long-term relationship I'd been in throughout most of my 20s. I'd like date girls like 2 or 3 weeks, whatever. And in hindsight, I attribute a lot of that to my drinking. You know what I mean? Like not to sound any kind of way. I think I'm a decent looking dude. I think I can talk to people. You know what I mean? So I was very much single for a long time. And I really think it was that reason. But yeah, so we had this trip planned to go to upstate New York to meet a lot of her friends. And her friends are like really important to her. It's like really important to her that I meet her friends and they like me and I make a good impression and all of these things. So we make the trip upstate and I remember I was like hungover and immediately when we got there, I just like, I wanted to have like a couple of drinks to just like take the edge off, you know what I mean? And also like, you learn things about yourself when you stop drinking. And one thing I learned is I do have some social like anxiety. Like I'm pretty good in like small groups, like 3 to 4 people, something like that. But like bigger groups, I have a bit of a harder time. So, I wanted to kind of cope with that a little bit. And yeah, just then ended up like kind of drinking too much and being an asshole and being kind of rude and snippy to my girlfriend. And then I remember I made like an Irish exit. Like I didn't even say goodbye. I just like dipped and made like a terrible impression on her friends. And, I woke up the next day and kind of like what I was speaking to earlier, like I just really like, I could kind of justify my drinking up until that point because like I wasn't doing so well. You know what I mean? I was bartending full time, and not that there's anything wrong with that. It was just like, wasn't where I thought I should be. You know what I mean? And I wasn't financially secure. I didn't have a partner, a girlfriend, whatever. Like I felt like my life wasn't going well. So I felt like it was, I don't know if I'd say okay to drink, but I felt like I was justified. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then I remember waking up from that big fight and leaving. I just felt like terrible. And just thinking, it's like, just why is this still happening? Like things are pretty good. Like, why is this still happening? And then the fear of like, I've worked hard to get to this point. Like, I'm going to lose these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that really kind of got me down the path. I remember the first thing, like we were talking about, like trying to find tools and things like that. I read The Easy Way to Stop Drinking by Alan Carr. I listened to it, I listened to that like 3 times over. And like I found the Recovery Elevator podcast, which I'm a member of that community. I'm pretty involved with them and just listen to those. And then, within a week or 2 after that incident, I was like, okay, I think I'm really done. And then I remember I had like friends coming into town, I think like 2 weeks after that. And I was like, that's it. That's going to be the last thing. And that was 3 years ago. Yeah, almost 3 years ago.
That is incredible. Because so many people, brother, I hear this all the time, either when I'm doing therapy or counseling or even coaching, they'll say, you can't just make a decision and be done. Like, it's not that easy. And I beg to differ, because it is.
I agree.
It's interesting because, 12 years ago 20 something years ago, when I walked away from addictions and that history, there was no looking back. Like, I was like, there was a point of no return, and I'm like, I'm done. Didn't need expensive rehab or treatment or anything like that. Just made a decision to cut all that crap out and to be done. And I got thinking that why is it so hard for some people to make their decision and put it into action? And I kind of get a concept of they're not really done yet. Yeah, they still feel like there's a back door open and whatnot. I think it's awesome that you had that series of events, and what you were doing is analyzing yourself to I'm not producing what I want out of this. I'm done. Did it change relationship with other friends who were kind of knew you were down for the cause or whatnot? Did you find yourself kind of being socially isolated for a bit? I mean, how did you cope with the fanfare or the social relationships, the close ones? Did they come along with you, or did those seem to dissolve as well?
Yeah, no, that was definitely a difficult thing. I posted about this the other day. I was very much a hermit my first couple of years. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to be around alcohol. In the beginning, just because I wasn't comfortable and I didn't want to risk my sobriety at all or anything like that. But then as I gathered some time, it just really wasn't appealing to me to go out to a bar and then just be around a bunch of people that are drinking too much. But yeah, I definitely lost some friends. At the time I was working at a gym in Manhattan, and it was it's a little ironic. You wouldn't think a gym is this way, but it was a very big party culture. We went out all the time and drank and everything. But I lost a lot of those relationships, but Blue, I've made a lot of much better ones.
Yeah.
Through the cat. Yeah. Yeah. I've made some great connections, cafe area. I've made some awesome friends there. I go to Bozeman every year with them. They do this retreat. That's amazing. And I teach fitness classes there. And, I've made some great friends there. And I mentioned to you before we got on camera, getting involved with the Phoenix and doing some classes for them. I've met some awesome people that are local, which is huge. And yeah, that was a hard thing for me, the social piece, because I very much did not want to go out. I definitely just switched addictions to work. I'm trying my best to learn how to navigate that. But, I opened a gym 6 months after I quit drinking. So, I very much just kind of switched, which I think a lot of people do. You substitute one thing the other, which is fine. I'd rather work. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But I'm curious about your switch from the ring to the trail, this run. Tell me a little bit about that, because I've run some ultra marathons. You absolutely find yourself out there, on mile 45, right? I mean, you do some stuff. I'm curious. Tell me about your experience. What ultra was it, and what did you find out there on the trail? I'm curious.
So I didn't do a formal race. I just it was during COVID when everything was locked down, and I actually wanted
even better. You did it because it was there, not because you signed up. It's cheaper that way.
100%. But yeah, I was actually at the time training to fight. I was going to get ready for a fight when things opened up. This was February 2020. And then it didn't seem like that was happening anytime soon. So I'm all right, I'm just going to do something that I can just do. And I don't need, you know what I mean? And I ran a marathon before that. I'd done the New York City Marathon. And, it was just so great for my mind. You know what I mean? Just that long form aerobic activity outside. And that's something I'm trying to come back to. One thing, when I got to my late 20s, I had a lot of injuries. And I still do, but they're manageable. But, I used to just box all the time. And, I'm not going to do an anatomy lesson here, but it led to some problems, just doing the same pattern over and over and over and not doing anything to kind of balance it out. I had neck, shoulder problems, all these things. And then I got really into weight training. Because I realized my body just wasn't strong enough to keep up with the things I was asking it to do anymore. And I've been really in that world for the last probably almost 5 years, and I like it. I like lifting weights. I like getting bigger. I like getting stronger. But it's not the same for your mind, And that's something that's a message I try to put out there is there's training for your mind, and there's training for your body. It's different. You know what I mean? And I think, and I think a lot of recovery folks, they just double down on the stuff for their mind. But then what I am fearful of for some of those people is that they overdo it and they get hurt and they can't do it. Whereas instead of running 6 days a week, run 4 days a week, and just lift weights 2 days a week, because it'll balance you out. It'll make you strong enough you'll be faster, you'll feel better on your runs, you'll get hurt way less. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And for me, I found that, especially, quitting my job and going to working for myself full time has been very stressful. And I found that going out and running, something I've kind of lost over I did it during COVID, but since then I haven't really done it. So 2 years has been really great for just mental clarity, and just quiets the chatter and helps me focus on things. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, you totally did. You totally did. Because listeners, the principle I want you guys to kind of discover here, and this is something that I found early on, in 2011 when I started Addict to Athlete, and that was, for some reason, like I said, movement equals healing. And as I was running with my clients, I started realizing they were processing so much more, doing more therapy out there on the road than they ever did in my office. I'm like, that's kind of a weird thing, right? My office, we're safe, no one can hear you, but while they were running, they felt free. And I thought I was creating this new modality of recovery, and it ended up being a modality called EMDR, which helps people process trauma. It's the left-right movement of your body, stimulates your frontal cortex to process trauma and put it into long-term memory where it's supposed to go. That's why when you're out there running, you might have started with a heavy heart or maybe some confusion, but by the time you're done, it's clear. It's because you're literally processing where that information is being stored. Instead of the fight or flight response up here, it moves into your memory. And as I was doing this, I started realizing that there's something big to this. But I look at all movement. I look at like you said, like hitting the bag, doing a speed bag. I watch people do the speed bag. I can't do that. I got zero rhythm, But I watch that and I'm like, when they get in the zone and they're just just rotating and just nailing that speed bag, that to me is one of the coolest things, because it is absolute focus, rhythm, timing, and just in the moment, right? And so I love that fact that you, even out there on your runs, you can see the benefit of that mental clarity. How do you get that now? How do you recreate that open mind opportunity so that you can let more in and excuse the negative stuff?
I'm sorry. So I've been running more. I've just kind of tried to implement that. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understood your question.
Yeah, just curious how you get focused now to make sure that you come with an empty mind of all the drama, trauma, garbage that we get plagued with, to get to a spot where you can have some clarity. What do you personally do now that keeps that mind sharp?
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Yeah, definitely the aerobic stuff. That's something I'm really trying to refine. I'm looking at a 50 miler in October. So I'm just just slowly but surely, just trying to get some miles in, just to make running familiar again. But I'm a big routine and habit person, as I think most people in recovery benefit from being, especially now, like I mentioned a couple times, I'm just working for myself. So I think that's really more important to have a routine and a schedule, which is just another really super duper important thing for recovery folks. You go to bed, you wake up at the same time, you have the same kind of things you do. So when I wake up, what I try to do is I try to just get outside and get light in my eyeballs. I'm a big Andrew Huberman fan. I don't know if you know who he is, but there's a lot. Yeah, he's awesome. But there's a lot of, really good physiological mechanisms and reactions and things like that happen when you get light in your eyeball. So I try to make sure I get that first thing in the morning. I get in a cold shower for 1 minute. For 1 minute, I just hop in, come out, and then I meditate for 5 to 10 minutes. So I try to hit that most mornings. I'm pretty good about it. Again, it's been my first week, but I've been pretty good about it. And I try to eat like an adult. That's a hard one. I have and again, back to a schedule, I have a pretty fixed, an ideal day, okay, I eat this at this time and eat that at this time. I kind of have what my day of eating should look like on most days. I try to watch my phone time. I try to keep that under 4 hours, which I have a bit of a hard time with, especially just in terms of work and stuff like that. And then at night, I try to just kind of get a hold of my next day. So I have just a planner that has my whole week kind of lined out. So all right, I'm doing this tomorrow, this move to this day, whatever it is. And then I try to get in bed and write, journal, and I do a little gratitude. So I'll write 3 things that I'm grateful for, and then I read, and then I try to go to bed. So if I can hit all those things, it's a good day. Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. So that takes an incredible amount of discipline. Again, something that a lot of people in recovery have a hard time, investing in is the discipline of it all. Learned behavior. How did you create that? Because that's a pretty tight schedule. How did you develop a sense of that discipline? I mean, was that from boxing or what? you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of guys shy away from that because that means if we're committed, we have to do it. And if we mess up, then, you know, game over, I suck. Why try? So on and so forth. How did you stay disciplined?
Yeah,
How'd you learn it?
I think my athletic background definitely helps. But also just, I think most people aim too high when they try to do this stuff. I think you need to aim low. You know what I mean? So to start off, you know, just like, okay, like I'm just going to walk outside and that's it. Like I'm going to walk outside the door and look outside and come back. You know what I mean? Like that's it, like stack. You know what I mean? And then try to build everything on top of each other. Because if you start too much too quick, you're going to fail. It's just like lifting weights or training or something, right? Like if you go and you're like, oh, I'm going to go run a 5K and you've never run before, like you're going to be done after a mile and not want to do it anymore, right? So you just have to aim lower and kind of humble yourself. You know what I mean? And yeah, starting with these lower level things and tracking, like, you know, what's get measured gets improved, you know? So I have like a planner that I really like. And that, you know, there's one section for the month where you can write in like habits you're trying to do. And I just like, I mark them off when I hit them. So it's like a nice scoreboard and you try to like build the chain, you know what I mean? So I can see all the X's next to each other, like consecutive days, and get some momentum with it. But yeah, just, I would say to simplify, just like tracking it and just like starting small. So, you know, if you have,
I don't think listeners, I don't think you guys understand the power of tracking that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't count days sober. I think that's kind of dumb because, you know, it's just my own thought process. I cleaned a million years ago. Who cares? But tracking your successes is so important. What kind of sense of accomplishment do you get when you look at that and you're like, man, I've been solid for the last, you know, 3 months. And, you know, that's got to feel pretty good, because if you don't track it, then we'll forget it. We are creatures of forgetfulness, like pretty often. How cool is it when you open that planner and you see that, like, dude, I've nailed this. I'm ready for whatever comes next. That's got to be kind of a cool, like, feeling, I would imagine.
Oh, 100%. And it helps me build like momentum for my day. You know what I mean? Like another thing I need to put into my schedule are like work sessions. You know what I mean? And I try to kind of protect that and try to get in states of deep work, which is something I like. Lots of book by Cal Newport, which I like a lot. Just basically like getting into these focused states to work on things that don't matter, and how we live in a distracted world, and story for another time. But like, yeah, but that's another thing. It kind of sets me up to optimize those times. You know what I mean? Like I kind of put myself, and that's like kind of a deeper reason why it's like, and again, like I keep coming back, especially now that I'm working for myself. Like if I don't, it's not like, you know, I was a teacher for a long time and I could just show up and not really, you know, that sounds terrible, but not really do my best and just be a body there and get through the day and get my paycheck. But now it's like, okay, like if I have those days, like maybe I don't close the sale later today, or maybe, you know, something falls through the cracks, and then that's going to affect me a lot more.
Totally.
So sticking to those routines, one thing that motivates me is to just like make sure I'm staying sharp and that I'm like, you know, on point with everything.
Gotcha. So you mentioned your girlfriend, now your fiance, a few times. What does she think of this new pursuit, this person you've become? I'm sure it's night and day. Like, what does she notice about the changes in the commitment, the person you've become?
Yeah, a lot. So it's pretty interesting because she's seen, like, we've been together in about 5 years now. And for the first, I think I misspoke earlier, but for the first like year, for the first like year we were dating, I was drinking. So she's seen mostly like sober me. And no, she definitely notices different. It was not easy. You know what I mean? Like definitely like the initial period, you're going through a lot, and it's tough to consider another person, I guess. You know what I mean? You're just going through so much yourself. And yeah, and then, you know, one thing I touched on as well is I was really not social for a while. I didn't want to go out and do things. And she's not a big drinker at all, but she just likes to go out with her friends, and I just really didn't want to go out. So that was tough.
Right.
But I think ultimately now she kind of sees in terms of like, you know, I've like grown a business, and you know, our lives are way better, you know. And I was very lucky to have her, man. Like she was great. She was always really supportive. You know, she helped me like just cope with it and find alternatives. Like this summer, you know, I remember for the 4th of July, she got me kava with, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like some people aren't like into any of that stuff at all. Some people, it's been good for me. I've liked it, you know what I mean? But she's like, you know, she knew I had like, you know, some of these family events, like 4th of July was hard for me because everybody's like partying up and having a great time. And she just like, you know, went through the trouble to find this thing like, hey, maybe you can try this and it can kind of help you help you feel better here, whatever. And it did. And it's something like, there's like a bar by our house that we go to once in a while. But anyway, she's been very supportive. Yeah.
Oh, it's just so important to have the cheerleaders and the supporters in your corner, because without it, man, it's like, what am I even doing this for? But tell me a little bit about your program then, because you're making a shift from the traditional like line of employment to kind of your own thing. Tell me a little bit about why you created this and kind of the foundations of it. Like, what do you want to accomplish with it? Because again, I think it's such a cool outlet that not a lot of people are aware of how important it truly is. So tell us a little bit about your pursuits.
Yeah, 100%. So I have so my main thing is I own Lapine Fitness Studio. So it's a one-on-one personal training facility in Brooklyn, New York. We do all completely private one-on-one training. So it's for mostly people that aren't comfortable in a traditional gym setting, and possibly they have really big they have to lose a lot of weight, they have injuries, anything like that. So it's a more hands-on approach. My fiance is a registered dietitian as well, so she works with a lot of our members to help. So that's kind of my main thing. That's what pays the bills. That's what's kind of led me to be able to quit my job. Aside from that, I do have Recovery Fit, which is kind of the Instagram I messaged you on. So that is very much aligned with what you guys do. It's just helping people, use fitness as a vehicle to recovery, right? So with that right now, I'm not trying to make money or anything really. I'm just trying to help. So like we talked off air, I'm doing a class for the Phoenix. If you're in Brooklyn, I'm doing a free boxing class there. For them, I'm going to start hosting classes for Cafe RE, like I mentioned, for that community, and just try to put out resources and good information. What I found, at least using like my social media channel, is people are at least more concerned with like more sober lifestyle stuff than fitness stuff, if that makes sense, just like how to go about it. So I post stuff about that, but also too, I'm going to just try to put out as many resources as I can. I have a few programs that I was going to put on there for free, and, just try to help as many people as I can. And then today I just started LSP, so Lapine Sports Performance. So I wanted to stay in touch with some of the kids from my school. So I'm starting an after school program there, just like a sports performance based thing. Yeah, where I can.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that takes off, and that can be, just another avenue for me. So those are like the three main things. Like the gym is the main thing that kind of pays the bills that I'm trying to build up and make into like a bigger thing. Ideally, I'd like to have multiple locations because it's it's a simple operation really. It's a 400 square foot space, and I just need a couple coaches, and our capacity is pretty low, so it's easy to replicate. There's not a ton of variables there, and I really just want to help people with their sobriety through fitness. If I can do that, winning. If that turns into something that I can, I don't want to sound any kind of way, but if it turns into something that I can monetize, then I can put more time, effort, and energy into it, and hopefully help more people.
100%.
Yeah.
That's what we did here.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We do a lot of free things, but it's always nice to be able to do more when you have some compensation for it. And I think that's there's nothing wrong with that part of it. The cool thing is that I've noticed there's a trend with you, like as a bartender, as a trainer, as a coach. You're kind of like this therapist to a certain degree. I mean, because you'll see the TV shows of the guys go to the bar and they're kicking wisdom to the bartender. Same thing happens when you're a trainer, when you're a coach, right? I mean, you find this. It's interesting that those things that you did have that common thread of being available to people. I'm curious, did you ever think to yourself that you'd be doing this kind of work, like helping, actually not even being a listener, being like a person that can hear people, that can see them where they're at, instead of like, critiquing / picking them apart. Like, you got to be a good listener. Do you find similarities in all of those things?
Yeah, I do. That's something I realized from a pretty young age that I was good at. That's just like I've always been pretty good with people, which has led me to be more successful in those things you mentioned. Especially coaching. It's like, I train a lot of coaches now, and I tell them, it's like, listen, if they like you and you don't hurt them, you're 90% of the way there. You know what I mean? That's really like the long and short of it, especially in the business model I have, being that it's all one-on-one. The big thing I look for when I'm hiring coaches is like that they're personable. You know what I mean? Like I tell them, I'm like, I want the members when they come to feel like they're, it's a little ironic that I'm using this analogy, but that they're like you just said, like they're going to see their favorite bartender when they're coming to see you. You know what I mean? Yeah. It is very much like that. And they're very much linked, you know what I mean? Especially people that have, some people have pretty big barriers to physical activity for whatever reason. And part of your job as a coach to kind of talk them through those and knock down those barriers so they can be successful. And even more so, my fiance, she's the same way, especially with the nutrition, it's even deeper. The nutrition is very, very tied to a lot of like kind of listening and talking and the therapy style. So yeah, it's a very big part of what I do for sure.
That's so wild, and I love it because it's at the core of who you are. I can tell. So, what do you say to that person who's coming in, kind of like green under the collar, so to speak, that doesn't know if sobriety is for them, doesn't really know what's to come, but they step into your ring. What do you do as a foundation to tell this person that if you are willing to be coached and willing to listen, we can get you to a point that you'd be super proud of? Like, how do you begin? Like, what foundation do you like to set for what's to come for a new person?
Yeah. Gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, I think step one is just asking good questions. You know what I mean? Like I've had a few like friends and just like random people on Instagram reach out to me, and I've just asked them like, oh, like what made you reach out? Like, was there something that I posted that like resonated with you, or do you feel like you've been having a hard time with drinking? Like, what made you reach out? And kind of bring them to the answer, I guess. You know what I mean? Because no one likes to be told something. No one likes that.
Yeah.
You don't want, you'd say like, oh, you have to, go to these meetings and you have to journal. No one likes that. You know what I mean? So I try to ask questions that will help them maybe come to that conclusion on their own. And then if they're open to it, share some things that I've done that have helped. You know what I mean? Like I think is better than you should. You know what I mean? Like I think you should journal. I think it would help. Not like you should journal. Like it'll help you. You know what I mean? Like there's a big difference there. So yeah, so that's it. Really just like, again, like asking questions. And I think too, like I think a lot of people, because I experienced this, is like just quitting drinking can just be way too big a thing to even kind of process, or quitting whatever you're doing. I know for myself, like a big cycle, like hamster wheel that I had was like, I always committed to a year. I would always in my head, like whenever I hit like one of those rock bottoms I mentioned earlier, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to quit drinking for a year. I'm going to give it a year and I'm going to quit drinking. Yeah, but I never did it. I never did it. But it was always just like, I would like commit to it, and I would do like 1 to 3 months and then I would stop it. You know what I mean? Because I kind of knew in the back that I probably got to quit drinking, but like just the thought of that was too big in my head. And I always would just like go to the year. And the year and committing to the year gave me like an easy exit. You know what I mean? Because I could just like do it over. Like if I didn't make it, be like, oh, I'll just do it later. I'll do it another time. Whereas like when I finally was like, okay, I'm going to quit drinking, like that was it. You know what I mean? So I think, you have to have a lot of, little deaths and rebirths before you kind of come to that final decision and be able to really follow through with it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing, right? Is that's the longest year of your life when you look back at it. You're like, man, what happened? I love it. How do people find you as we wrap up here? Like, how do people find you? What social media outlets? Because I love what you're doing, and I think that some of our athletes need to kind of maybe be in tune with what you've got going. How do they find you?
Yeah, 100%. So on Instagram, soberpaul_. It's funny. I used to be called Stoner Paul in college, and then as a joke, people started calling me Sober Paul. So I thought I'd take that. And also, Paul Lapine was taken on Instagram. Like I tried it.
Really?
I don't think it's that common of a name, but yeah, I did like the underscore.
Who's that guy? Some dude out there making like clay pottery or something? What's going on
I guess so. I don't know. I got to figure it out, but I don't know. I think Sober Paul's got a nice ring to it. And if you happen to be in the New York City area, I have Lapine Fitness Studio, so I do those free classes for people in recovery. And yeah, if you're local, then you want to meet, that's great. And just my website is just lapinefit.com. That's really just for my gym. So yeah, so Sober Paul, awesome. Lapine Fitness Studio on Instagram, and then lapinefit.com.
Brilliant. Well, brother, we'll put all those links in this podcast. It'll come out this coming Monday. I'm so thankful for you to be able to slice out some time, especially as a new entrepreneur, man. You're busy, so thank you for taking some time. It does help the listeners kind of get a feel for what else is out there, and that there's an easy way to do it if you're willing to put in the time. So thanks so much, man. We'll definitely have to keep in touch, because I look forward to one day coming out and running that New York Marathon. So I'll need to come out and hang out with you, and you can show me some ropes around there so I don't get lost. But it'd be cool to like have some of our listeners reach out to you, because I've seen your stuff. You've got great content. So thanks for being part of this listeners, you've been well fed. Check out some of what Paul's got to offer. Like he said, he's got some things available to help you on your path. And quite frankly, as he posts some of these programs he's talking about, utilize them. Those are free tools. You live in a day and age where that's just a fingertip away. Why spend thousands and thousands of dollars when you can go to people like Paul and get it, for just your investment of time? So thanks so much, brother. Listeners, thank you so much for downloading. Share this podcast. And until next time, please continue to turn that mess into a message.